Jennifer Donilon. I'm Director of Communications for the Maryland Office of Attorney General. It is so amazing to see all of your beautiful faces. What an amazing day. Really quick, just one housekeeping item. Can any members of the media please raise your hand, identify your name and outlet, please?
I'm Katie Howard with the Washington Post.
Keith Hart with the Washington Post.
Welcome, welcome.
William Ford with Maryland Matters. Good afternoon.
All right, thank you very much. I turn over the mic. Thank you. Have a great afternoon.
All right, how's everybody doing? Oh, what a great day. What a great day, yes indeed. I'm Anthony Brown, I'm Maryland's Attorney General, and I have the honor, I don't know if this is on, but I hope you can hear me with my inside voice or my outside voice, whichever one. And I have the privilege of serving as chair of this commission on the House of Reformation and Instruction for Colored Children. You're going to hear me unless someone quietly taps on my shoulder during a break or after the meeting that's offensive to you. You're going to hear me refer to this as the Commission on the House of Reformation. But our title is the Commission on the House of Reformation and Instruction for Colored Children. I've got some opening remarks. I'm at that point in my career where I admit things that I wouldn't normally admit, and hopefully it goes over your head. These remarks are probably a little bit longer than I'm used to giving, but because of the moment and because of the significance of this commission and our convening, I'm not going to be too concerned about the length of time. So let me start by saying good afternoon and welcome to the inaugural meeting of the Commission on the House of Reformation. To every commission member and advisory member in this room, I say thank you. You didn't have to say yes. You have full lives, demanding jobs, and many competing calls on your time. The fact that you're here and that so many of you have already begun the work before this meeting even began tells me everything that I need to know about the kind of commission that this is going to be. The statute names 21 commission members, but the response to this commission was so overwhelming, from family members to nationally recognized experts in so many relevant fields, that we created 10 additional positions, advisory members who will work alongside our commission, alongside our commission members in every respect except voting. I had the authority to extend that privilege. I would have done that as well. I also want to acknowledge the many additional stakeholders, advocates, and members of the public who want to be a part of this work. Your presence and your persistence matters, and we're working to develop pathways for everyone who wants to engage to find an opportunity to do that through the work of the Commission. Before we turn to the agenda, I want to say a few things that I hope will set the right tone for everything that follows. And I need to begin with the children. Not the commission, not the budget, not the RFPs, but the children. Somewhere beneath overgrown ground in Prince George's County, in graves that were left largely unmarked for generations, lie hundreds of black boys, some as young as 5 years old, who died in the custody of the state of Maryland. They were beaten, many. They were forced to labor. They were denied an education. They were malnourished and medically neglected. And when they died, many of them were buried without their family's knowledge in a cemetery that was for decades largely forgotten. I've been to that cemetery twice now. First time I went with my executive leadership team before the commission was even fully constituted, because I needed to see it for myself. I needed the leadership of the entire Office of the Attorney General to have an appreciation for the work that we were about to set out to do. I stood among the cinder blocks and the few legible headstones and tried to comprehend what had happened on that ground. The second time I went with many of you, our members, and something shifted. Standing there together made the weight of what we are undertaking real in a way that no document or briefing could. Each visit has left me more moved, more humbled, and more determined than the last. This work is personal for me. Prince George's County is my home. I chose to move there. It's here, there in Prince George's County where I raised my children. I've served Prince George's County, and knowing that for more than a century, hundreds of black children suffered and were buried in unmarked graves just miles from where I live, and that the state largely looked away, that's not something that I'm willing to accept as history. It's something I'm committed to do something about. The House of Reformation is not an isolated chapter. It's part of a long continuum from the criminalization of black children in the 19th century to the school-to-prison pipeline we're fighting to disrupt in Maryland today. That thread runs directly through Cheltenham. The Commission's work is not only about the past, it's about what kind of future we're willing to build. When I first came across reporting about the House of Reformation, it stopped me cold. I was not aware of it, like I'm sure many of you in this room could say the same. I later spoke with Senator Will Smith, who shared his interest in establishing a commission to investigate this history and determine how Maryland should respond. I told him that the Office of the Attorney General was prepared to assist, and I offered the experience and resources of our office, including what we learned providing staff support to the Maryland Lynching, Truth, and Reconciliation Commission. Senator Smith's leadership, along with Delegate Jeffrey Long's leadership in the House of Delegates, led to this legislation that established this commission. Our role in the OAG was to support their vision and help make it succeed. And today it becomes this. Before I go further, I want to name the people who made this possible. I want to thank the Legislative Black Caucus, whose sustained advocacy never let this issue go. Governor Moore, whose vision made it state policy. And again, Senator Will Smith and Delegate Jeffrey Long, who carried the legislation to passage. I thank them, and I thank all of you. I want to address something directly. It's come up. For some, perhaps it's a big issue. For others, perhaps you're hearing it for the first time. Whether there is a conflict of interest in the Office of the Attorney General chairing and staffing this commission, given that the Office of the Attorney General also represents state agencies like the Department of Juvenile Services that are part of this history. It's a fair question and deserves a direct answer. The Office of the Attorney General exists to serve the people of Maryland. All of us, not any single agency. When the General Assembly created this commission, it directed every state agency and political subdivision to cooperate fully with this commission's investigation. That is a broad, sweeping mandate to all of state and local government, to open their records, their facilities, and their institutional knowledge. This was designed to be a collaborative undertaking, not an adversarial one. And that's exactly how we're approaching it. My general counsel has carefully examined the question of potential conflicts and put a framework in place to address them. But the more fundamental point is this. There's no tension between my role as Attorney General and my role as chair of this commission, because in both roles, my interests are the same. That's the people of Maryland, and the people of Maryland deserve the truth. More fundamentally, Governor Moore, Secretary Tolentino, and this commission all share the same goal: to implement this mandate fully, honestly, and with integrity. DJS has been a partner in this work from the very beginning, conducting the foundational historical research this commission will build upon in securing the initial grant funding. Today, Secretary Tolentino is here at this table, not as a reluctant participant, but as a committed one who's actually going to address the commission shortly. This is the state of Maryland, all of us, finally doing what should have been done long ago. Now, let me say a word about resources, because I want you to understand the seriousness with which the state of Maryland and the governor have approached this work. I sincerely believe that the creation of this commission, this past legislative session, if not this past decade in Maryland, is the most significant commission established by the General Assembly by any measure. Our mission, the membership, and the resources. The commission enters its first year with a budget of approximately $1.2 million. $1 million in state general funds, and a $200,000 grant from the Maryland Historical Trust and the Commission on African American History and Culture. That's a meaningful investment, and it didn't happen by accident. It happened because people refused to let this history stay buried. I also want to say a special word of thanks again to Secretary Tolentino and Department of Juvenile Services. DJS didn't wait for this commission to exist before doing the work. They researched the history, they secured a grant to begin preserving the cemetery, they identified death certificates, they went to the site, they've been to the site over and over again. Today they're here passing the torch in partnership to this commission. And while I may steal the Secretary's thunder, I learned recently that every employee at DJS, and when you're newly arriving, newly hired, get a briefing, an orientation about what we know at this burial site. And I'm sure the Secretary could say more about that. I've already stole your thunder. And I want to thank the OAG staff who built what you see before you today, or what you'll hear about during this inaugural meeting, from scratch. Deputy Attorney General Anita Wickham-Hurley, where's Anita? There she is. Assistant Attorney General Sophie Asike, and Assistant Attorney General Tiffany Diamo. And where's Tiffany and Sophie? Yeah, Sophie, she's my right hand, she's not going anywhere. Never leave home without your subject matter expert. Alongside the agency staff and the commission members who began working together well before today, I thank each and every one of you. Let me give you a brief preview of what the agency has produced. What this urgency has produced. Today, you'll hear from the state archivist. Where's the state archivist? Okay, great. We're gonna hear from you about the records work already underway, and receive a budget and procurement update, including the scope of work, and I put a footnote there. I know it's gonna be modified, and nothing's set in stone, but at least to get a preview on the scope of work for our first major procurement, which will be a genealogical research contract that will be the foundation of our identification work. That contract is prioritizing one thing: finding the names of the boys who died here and finding their families. That's where we're starting. Not with the memorial, not with the curriculum, with the children and the people who love them. You'll also be presented with our subcommittee structure, which will be the engine of this commission's work. 5 bodies, each charged with a distinct piece of our mandate, each designed to allow us to move our multiple fronts simultaneously. And also today you'll hear from Commission Member Phyllis Hammond. Dr. Hammond, where is she? Down here. We're going to hear from you, thank you, a family member of one of the boys buried at this site, who will open the floor for family testimony. Centering family testimony is not a one-time gesture. It's our commitment. For every meeting where it is possible, we will make space for the voices of families. This commission only means what it means if it belongs to them. To make that commitment permanent, you'll also be asked today to approve protocols governing the implementation of a family advisory committee, a standing body that gives families a direct, ongoing channel to this commission for the duration of our work. It'll be a real forum, regular meetings, direct staff contact, advance notice of our meetings and materials, and a documented process that ensures that every family recommendation reaches this commission and receives a response. This committee is how we keep that promise through our final report and beyond. I want to close by naming the moment we are in. We're meeting at a time when many in our federal leadership are turning away from acknowledging the history that made this country what it is. That makes what we're doing here more important, not less. The state of Maryland is choosing to look clearly at a painful chapter of its own history, not to perform accountability, but to actually pursue it. That's a choice, and I'm proud that we're making it together. You'll hear some of DJS's initial findings today about the history of the House of Reformation. I want to prepare you. You'll be outraged. You'll be saddened. You may be horrified. I was. But I hope, I believe, you'll also be energized, because these children are depending on us to do this work, and their families are watching. So let us begin. And I'd now like to turn the floor over to Secretary Tolentino to share a few words about what we're going to do to move this agenda. Secretary Tolentino.
Thank you. And thank you all for being here as we officially convene the Commission of the Maryland House of Reformation. Today marks an important next step. It reflects a shared commitment to pursuing the truth and understanding our history. Through thoughtful research, documentation, public engagement, this commission will help establish a fuller understanding of the Maryland House of Reformation, acknowledge the history with honesty, and create space for learning, reflection, and most importantly, healing. As Secretary of the Department of Juvenile Services, I believe we have a responsibility to understand the history of the institutions, the systems, and the young people that came before us. That understanding helps shape the values that guide the work that we do every day and strengthens our commitment to serving every young person with dignity, humanity, and respect. I want to thank Attorney General Anthony Brown and his office for their leadership and urgency in guiding this important work to its next chapter. We are grateful for your partnership and your commitment to ensuring this commission has the support and resource it needs to carry out this important work. I also want to recognize Senator Will Smith and Delegate Jeff Long for their sponsoring of this legislation to create the commission, and Governor Westmore for making sure the commission has the resources necessary to fulfill and shape its mission. I also want to recognize Tiana Davis. Tiana will be representing the Maryland Department of Juvenile Services on the commission. Tiana has done extraordinary work preserving and sharing the history of our agency with care, integrity, and thoughtfulness. And I know she will bring those same qualities to the commission as this important work starts to move forward. And I also want to recognize Crystal Faritia. During her fellowship with DJS, Crystal demonstrated an extraordinary commitment to uncovering and documenting the history of the Maryland House of Reformation. Her work helps shine a light on this chapter of Maryland's history and provides a valuable foundation for the work of this commission. We are incredibly proud of all the work that Crystal has accomplished at her time at DJS, including her work this summer at the Maryland Office of Attorney General, and as she prepares for her second year at Yale Law School. It is my honor to introduce Crystal, whose commitment to uncovering and documenting the history of the Maryland House of Reformation helped bring us to this moment. So please join me in welcoming Crystal.
Before we introduce Crystal, we could just go around the table and introduce all of the commissioners and advisory members. And then Tiffany will read off the names of the commissioners and advisory members who are online. So we can start with Commissioner Hammond.
Hi, I'm Commissioner Phyllis Hammond, and I'm serving on this board as with a member of a family member that was at this House of Reformation.
Michael Kennard, I'm a professor at the University of Maryland, Kelley School of Law. I'm sorry, I don't know if you heard me. Michael Kennard, professor at the University of Maryland, Carey School of Law, the faculty director of the Gibson Bank Center for Race and the Law. The Gibson Bank Center is one of the entities named in the legislation, so I'm representing the Gibson Bank Center in this capacity.
Yeah, thank you. Sorry about that, I didn't have a microphone. My name is Phyllis Hammond, and as I stated, I am representing a family member, Amos Hammond, who died and buried at this House of Reformation.
Thank you so much. I'm Mary Ann Scally with the Galt Center, Defenders of Youth Rights, a national organization that serves the rights and interests of young people across the country who are impacted and unfortunately continue to be oppressed in many of these systems. Grateful to be here with, and on behalf of all the families who are dedicated to understanding what happened to their loved ones.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Peter Phineas Ramsey. I am the Director of Social Studies, and I'm representing the Maryland State Department of Education.
Hello, everyone. My name is Justin Hansford. I am a commissioner. I am a law professor at Howard University School of Law, the founder and director of the Thurgood Marshall Civil Rights Center. I'm also the founder of the Charles Ogletree Reparations Bar Association, designed to support lawyers who work on reparations cases.
I'm Michael Blakey. I'm an advisor to the Commission. I'm a bioarchaeologist and an ethicist. I'm NEH professor of anthropology, Africana Studies and American Studies at William and Mary. I had directed the African Burial Ground Project in New York with Howard University, and it's heartfelt for me to be part of this process.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm David Terry. I'm the faculty of Morgan State University, historian in the Department of History, Geography, and Museum Studies.
Dr. Julia Shublitsky, adjunct assistant professor at the University of Maryland, expertise as a historical archaeologist, burial grounds, and genetic archaeology.
I'm Elaine Rice Bachman. I'm the Maryland State Archivist, and I am a commissioner ex officio.
Good afternoon, Gloria Brown Burnett, Deputy Secretary with the Maryland Department of Human Services.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Tiana Davis. I'm the Executive Director, of the Office of Equity and Inclusion at the Department of Juvenile Services.
Hello, my name is Amelia Chisholm. I'm an archaeology planner and representing the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission, Prince George's County.
Hello, everyone. My name is Sophia Sike. I'm an Assistant Attorney General with the Office of Equity, Policy, and Engagement, and I am serving as staff and counsel.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Heather Warkin. I serve as Executive Director at the Center for Criminal Justice Reform at the University of Baltimore Law School. Honored to be serving as an advisory commissioner.
Hello, my name is Erica Fields. I'm one of the public members representing a civil rights organization. I'm here from the Children's Defense Fund. My role there is Data and Systems Administrator. But at the Children's Defense Fund, our mission is to build community so young people thrive in dignity, hope, and joy.
Good afternoon. My name is Elizabeth Hughes. I'm the Director of the Maryland Historical Trust, which serves as Maryland State Historic Preservation Office, and I am a Commissioner ex officio.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Siobhan Summers. I am faculty specialist in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Maryland, and my specialty is forensic anthropology, bioarchaeology, and American history.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Dr. Linda Gorham. I'm a licensed psychologist in Maryland. I am on the committee because my cousin, Richard Saunders, age 15, died at the House of Reformation in 1935, so I'm here for Richard.
Good afternoon. My name is Dorothy Gibbons. I am a descendant of Fred Ames, who died at the House of Reformation. And also, I have another relative, an uncle, who was with Fred at the House of Reformation. He made it home. Fred didn't. And when he returned home, we were able to learn what had happened at the House of Reformation. That is how we found out about Fred's death. I am an advisory member.
My name is Steve Archer. I'm the Chief of the Historic Preservation Division at the Maryland Department of Transportation State Highway Administration. I'm an ex officio commissioner, archaeologist by training, and very, very humbled to be assisting in this important effort.
Hi, I'm Kat Ulrich. I'm the founder and director of the Baltimore Community Archaeology Lab at Towson University, and I'm an advisory member.
Good afternoon, I'm Kali Aset Amen. I'm an ex officio member. I'm the chair of the Maryland Commission on African American History and Culture.
Great afternoon, my name is Harleen Flowers. I'm a cultural engineer, founder of the Autonomics Initiative in partnership with the Obama Foundation. We help creatives navigate through the 21st century creative economy, learning how to protect, scale, and estate planning intellectual property. And I'm honored to be here to really preserve the intellectual property, the literature and the arts that these young boys created when they was in this facility outside of the government records, and learning how, the family members in the institution recorded their photographs, their drawings, their music, their poems, their creativity in order to preserve their history from their perspective through their intellectual property. Thank you.
And joining us online is Dr. Erin Kimmerly, who serves as an advisory member on the commission. And I will now turn it over to Crystal to begin her presentation. Thank you, Crystal.
Hello? Okay. Perfect. Okay, good. Good afternoon, everyone. Let me tell this mic up, actually, so I'm not crouched. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm really humbled to be here today with you all, and I thank you all for your engagement with this history. My name is Crystal Faritia, she, her, hers. As Secretary Talentino lovingly described, I'm a law student at Yale University, but more importantly for this work, I was the principal researcher for the Department of Juvenile Services as it pertains to the historical work about the House of Reformation and instruction for colored children. And so, given the work that's ahead of this commission, I really think it's important to lay the foundation as to what's already been found and discuss not just the history of the House of Reformation, but the way in which the research was conducted, so you have a sense of the available evidentiary sources and where the commission can go from here. And so, without further ado, let's get on with the presentation. To understand the atrocities that happened at the House of Reformation, we need to have an understanding as to the landscape of juvenile justice for Black children prior to the creation of the House of Reformation. And so, prior to the 1870s, Black children, often between the ages of 5 and 16, as the age you alluded to, were sent to adult jails or the state penitentiary for crimes and delinquent acts. Offenses include vagrancy, which could be understood to mean homelessness or loitering, incorrigibility, which just means disobedience, and minor without proper care, which can be understood as the court deciding that the child is in need of supervision. Those were the most common offenses that children would be sent to, again, adult jails and state penitentiary for. Things that we would consider status offenses today. In 1867, a Baltimore City grand jury called on the Maryland General Assembly to create a separate institution for Black children who were alleged or found to have committed delinquent acts. and separate them from the adult prison system. And this was not a new phenomenon. 37 years prior, Maryland had passed a law to pull white children from the adult prison system. And so at this point, 1830, the Maryland General Assembly had decided to pull white children from the adult carceral system and would not come to the point of doing the same until 40 years later in 1870. The Maryland General Assembly passed a law establishing the House of Reformation and Instruction for Colored Children to be the black parallel to the white institution then called the House of Refuge for Juvenile Delinquents. In its structure, the law made it so that the House of Reformation would be a privately operated facility that would receive money from the state government as well as Baltimore City government. Through its creation, the House of Reformation in Cheltenham was the first institution in the American South to specifically serve black children who were convicted essentially of crimes. And so it's really foundational to Southern history, what the House of Reformation stood for. The House of Reformation opened 3 years later in January of 1873 due to a donation by Enoch Pratt, a Baltimore City philanthropist. And when we look at the founding documents of the House of Reformation, it becomes clear the importance of labor extraction to the perceived moral development of black children. Just to read this quote from an early annual report, this is 2 years after the founding of the institution. They are required to work, to learn how to work, and to know the importance of labor, to learn how to handle the hoe, shovel, and spade, to manage horses, mules, and cattle, to plow, to sow, to reap, and gather the grain into garners. In case it wasn't already clear, the all-white administrators at the House of Reformation believed that not just labor, not just hard labor, but hard agricultural labor was foundational to the correction, in air quotes, of black children. Usually when I give this presentation, I engage with the audience a bit to ask them questions about, for example, when did the Civil War end? And how soon after did the Civil War is this succeeding being said? But given the setup that we have, just to answer my own question, Civil War ended in 1865. This is being said in 1875, so we're only 10 years removed from the formal abolition of slavery. And this is the attitude that's being given to black children that are in this custody of older white adults. Additionally, we're knee deep in the Reconstruction era where the American South is finding new ways to try and reinstate slavery. And so, given the timeline here, it's become deeply unsurprising, albeit very tragic, the patterns of racial abuse and bias that the boys would experience. For decades, whistleblowers, grand jury reports that are supposed to act as oversight, and other outsiders accuse the House of Reformation very credibly of labor exploitation, physical abuse, poor medical care, and unsanitary living conditions. And that's just the tip of the iceberg for all the atrocities, but these are just the main ones I want to highlight today. And it's not just outsiders that made those accusations. Between the 1910s and 1930s, the Afro-American, a black Baltimore City newspaper, published letters from convicted youth to expose the abuses that they experienced or witnessed in the facility. So we have the children's own words describing what they went through. Just to give an example, as it pertains to the labor exploitation, because I really want to hone in on that as one of the foundational crimes that this institution committed against them. You have, and you'll see this in my report, you guys have probably a chance to read, quotes from William Creasy in 1925, where he describes a system of essentially convict leasing that was taking place at the facility. And in his own words, he describes how the boys were leased out to white farmers in Prince George's County, who were, quote, mean people who hated colored people and worked the boys just like slaves. So it's not just us sitting in 2026 and making the comparison to slavery and Jim Crow, but it's the boys who lived it who were making comparisons to slavery at the time, and likely had parents, grandparents, relatives who themselves experienced slavery. Similarly, 10 years later, you'll have similar testimonies from George Clark, who the tribute from in my report. Even after conduct leasing allegedly had ended, there were still other ways in which the boys' labor was extracted. In this picture here to the right, you'll see the boys working in a broom factory. This broom factory was one of the ways in which the labor at the House of Reformation was repeatedly excoriated by whistleblowers, grand jury reports, due to its lack of fire safety and lack of rehabilitative value, to the point where in 1928 there actually had been a fire at the facility. And so it's really the testimonies that we see from these boys that really begin to galvanize support for turning the House of Reformation into a publicly operated facility so that there's this semblance of accountability. And it's not until the shooting of a black boy in 1934 that the movement really takes off and then leads to the transfer of state ownership in 1937. The shooting of this black boy, Aubrey, I think lends us to a really pivotal transition point as to the horrors committed by this institution, which is the hidden burials. Aubrey, unlike the people who I'm going to discuss for the rest of this chat, luckily survived and was able to have his story documented, have photographs of his injuries, and was able to continue living. Many boys at the facility, as many of you are already aware, could not. So we have physical and documentary evidence that reveal that House of Reformation leaders buried at least 230 boys near the Cheltenham campus. There are two known sections of the burial ground thus far. One that was established in 19th century that has more proper markers that you would assume that a cemetery would have, with engravings of names, date of death, etc. But then there's a second plot of land that was established in the early 20th century, and that's where you see the cinder blocks, as the Attorney General alluded to. I want to read this quote from Community Youth because it's deeply important to understand how we have evidence of the cemetery existing for decades, 90 years ago. Harry Brown said, "On one occasion, parents came to inquire about a boy and were told the boy had run away. But the truth is that I had helped bury that boy just the night before." I wanted us to have a moment of silence, just take a beat, because the implication here is that boys repeatedly, as they're being starved, as they're being overcrowded, as they're denied an education, their labor was extracted to then bury the sins of this institution and to bury their own comrades. Skipping ahead from 1934 to 2024 is where we get to the rediscovery of the cemetery that Harry's talking about. As you can see here, my colleagues at DJS and I were put ourselves to work when it comes to rediscovering the cemetery after we looked at the documents such as a 2009 inventory report. So here, just to take a step back as to the status of the cemetery before we found it. In 1976, the Department of Juvenile Services had transferred ownership of the cemetery to the Department of Veterans and Military Families. And so when my colleagues and I were trying to find where the cemetery was, we were not well positioned to do so because it was no longer land that DJS owned. It's not something that we really kept track of. And then, as I alluded to earlier, the last survey conducted on the cemetery had been in 2009. It was cataloged with the Maryland Historical Trust, and the survey had been commissioned on behalf of the Maryland National Capital Park and Planning Commission. And it included photos of the cemetery, different headstones, but it wasn't clear where the precise coordinates were for the cemetery. And so one could not easily retrace where the cemetery was just from the inventory report alone. And so we partnered with the Maryland Historical Trust to find the cemetery, and a huge shout out to the work of the Maryland Historical Trust because it's only through them that we got the maps necessary to find where the cemetery was, which then led to us showing up October 31st, 2024 to find 4 legible headstones and roses to their blocks. Here is the main map that we used from the Maryland Historical Trust, and then here are the gravestones. And so on the bottom left, you can see of like probably one of the better preserved markers. The name is Osbury Brown, and he's from Annapolis, Maryland, died April 15th, 1887, age 15. As horrific as it is, the thing that's striking to me is how like this headstone is probably one of the most dignified of the ones that are there, because the engraving is largely intact, it's fully upright, especially when you compare it to its counterpart on the right, where it's just a cinder block, moss growing on it. There is no way you can identify who that is, or who that represents. And the thing to keep in mind is that 15 years is a long time between when something was last photographed and when something is being rediscovered, especially after decades of neglect and lack of maintenance. Here's the headstone of Anton Johnson. It's here in 2009. It was quite similar to Osbury's in that you see his full name. You can see that he's from Baltimore, Maryland. You can see that he died March 21st, 1888. And you can see that he was 11 years old. That's what his headstone looked like in 2009. Here's what it looked like in 2024. I cannot think of a more horrific but fitting metaphor for what has been allowed to happen to these boys due to the neglect and abandon of the House Reformation and the subsequent lack of institutional memory by the state at large. And so, given the way that these boys were exploited in life and forgotten in death, I think this image really impresses upon us the urgency of the work that we have ahead of us. And the last thing I want to say as to what the cemetery looks like now is the importance of pulling multiple historical sources together so that we can tell a more complete story as to what happened to each individual child. Excuse me. On the left, you see a photograph of a headstone in disrepair. This photograph was taken in 1974. It just so happened to be included in an inventory report from 1998 that's filed with the Maryland Historical Trust. Thank you to them again. And in this photo, it's really hard to see the name because the engraving is partially blocked off. But you can see that they were from Annapolis. You can see that they died March 17th, 1885, and that they were 21 years old. It wasn't until I was doing additional research, looking at death records, looking at death certificates, that I stumbled upon an obituary in a Anne Arundel County newspaper that the name Samuel Folks came to light. And when I checked the name and I checked the headstone, it's when it clicked that that's who that child was. And so you can see the name of his mother, Alice Folks, and the confirmation that he was in fact buried at the facility because it said so in his obituary. I know that we're short on time, so I do want to go over the way in which this historical work was even allowed to happen with the archives, databases, and sources that were available. So the first first set of archives I really want to get into are the historical newspaper databases that I used. The Afro-American was an indelible resource for even just being able to tell the story because they digitized their records with Google News and they were not behind a paywall. And so the big image you see on the left is just an example of the terrible press coverage that the House of Reformation rightly deserved for its treatment of youth, for its long sentences, for the physical abuse, and the photography that it was attached to. And then for other newspapers like the Baltimore Sun or the obituaries, such as those for Samuel Folks, I used newspapers.com, Chronicling America, and other sources. The next source I want to highlight is the Maryland Historical Trust Cultural Resource Information System. This is where the archaeological surveys and inventory reports are cataloged for the House of Reformation. And here, these reports will have the general chronology of the House of Reformation, its construction, as well as the photographs from the 2009 report that show what the cemetery had looked like. And so this was really foundational in terms of me finding the cemetery, because it was the 2009 report that really told me that not only were there deaths at the facility, but that the boys were buried very close to the grounds. And then the death records. So as A.G. Brown alluded to, during my time at the Department of Juvenile Services, I was able to discover or rediscover death certificates that pertain to the boys that were at the facility. A retired researcher had done the work of going through the Maryland State Archives of digitized death records from 1898 onward and putting them in a more accessible database online. And then after a Google search, I was able to find her work with the uploaded death certificates and then catalog the boys' names, their parents' names, county of origin, the official cause of death, and other identifying information to tell a full picture as to who the boys were, and particularly for those who had only cinder block to remember them by. And so you can find these death certificates on Find a Grave, but then the original place for them, the original repository for them, is the Maryland State Archives. And then I'll probably speed run this a little bit, types of evidence. So we've already covered that newspapers are important because of the fact that they often held obituaries for the boys. They had photographs of the tombstones or the boys themselves, and you can get somewhat of a sense of the alleged circumstances of their death, particularly if the boy was killed as opposed to a disease. Next are the logbooks, and I trust the Maryland State Archives to talk about this a bit more, but logbooks are deeply important because they were the internal documents of the House of Reformation, where they catalog the boy's name, their physical attributes, the county of origin, what offense led them to the facility in the first place, and their entry and exit dates, especially if they were in and out of the facility. And so that's really telling as to what the administrators themselves knew about the deaths. This is the earliest form of death certificates in the state. The death certificates did not become standardized and widely issued until 1898. And here you can see that it's basically an index card with the boy's name, Shellingham, their parents' name, the county of origin. But the thing I want to zero in on with this early death certificate is that oftentimes under occupation, it's yet another reminder of the forced labor that they were made to endure. For those of you who can't read cursive or having trouble seeing, under occupation it reads cane chairs, which is important when it comes to how the boys' labor was used. William Coleman was 12 years old, and the fact that he was in the caning chair factory is completely unsurprising given things that were said about the facility in 1900. Quote, "The farm contains about 700 acres of undergood cultivation. The labor of larger boys being utilized in that way, the smaller boys kept at work caning chairs." So that's just like one. So the caning chairs, in addition to the broom factory and the basket factory, are all ways in which the boys were exploited, and it's really haunting that that's how they're remembered on their death certificates. The death certificate that you're seeing here is a later type that was issued in the 1910s, 1920s, 1930s, and you get a little bit more information. It has essentially the same information as the first type with their name, this time adding an explicit date of birth and not just a date of death, the parents' names, the official cause of death, and very critically, the home address of the child. And so that can be really important when it comes to identifying family members, but because you can cross-reference with property records potentially. Okay, I think this slide covers everything I've told you with the different types of information that you can get from each source that I listed out. And obviously, these sources are not the only ones, but these are the ones that I was able to use in my research prior to leaving the department last year. The last thing I want to leave you guys with is just making sure you approach his history with heavy skepticism as to the narratives that are told about these boys when it comes to the official sources and sources produced by the House of Reformation leaders. On the available death certificates, they all list a disease as the initial cause of death, with the most common disease being tuberculosis, which has multiple names, pneumonia, typhoid fever, and meningitis. But the official cause of death cannot be the end of the story as to how these children died, because how they contracted the disease and whether or not they had adequate medical care is important to ask, so that we know the extent of the structural inadequacy and neglect that the facility itself enabled. So researchers, I encourage them to consider whether the disease was contracted at home, which you can occasionally find in the death certificates. What were the living conditions of sick youth? Were they separated from the general population, or were they allowed to be among the general population and spread the disease? As you can see here, this is what the dormitory looked like in the 1910s, and you can see all these beds are next together, all crowded together. And so if you have a kid with the flu who's then sneezing and passing it around to everyone that they're in the same dorm with, how likely is it to spread? What was the institution's healthcare infrastructure? Evidence was shown that there wasn't always a nurse that was on staff at the facility hospital. In 1938, the facility's hospital burned down. And so did these kids even have an on-site nurse or healthcare practitioner to get treated? And finally, comparing the death rate at the whites-only institution, the House of Refuge or Training for Boys, I think is really important in terms of comparing I think it's really important for comparing the institutions, so that we have the full context to why these Black boys died. Was this a issue in general at reform schools, or was it just the one specific to the Black children? That is it, folks.
Thank you, Crystal. Maybe if there's room for 2 questions, and we'll limit it to 2, if any, but we do have a full agenda, and if not, we'll continue. Okay?
Very quick, since the agricultural labor was the focus here at the house for colored children, what was the focus for reform at the house for the white boys?
That's an excellent question, and something that I would encourage the DNS or this commission to also look into. So there was evidence, there was labor that the boys were put through at the white reform school, the House of Refuge / Training School for Boys, but basically the sources I had to work with to uncover the story were more limited, and essentially the labor that was at the white only reform school was more so apprenticeships with artisans in the area, as opposed to agricultural labor. The labor that the boys went through was still not okay. There are times where it seems that they might experience indentured servitude, but the magnitude was not quite the same from the sources that I could find. And something I didn't get to mention in my main presentation, but I want to mention here, is that the Black boys would often be made to do indentured servitude even after their formal commitment to the House of Reformation. So even when they should have been back home with their families, after the end of their term, they're sent to a white family to be of service to them and for good reason. And in contrast, there's no equivalent practice that I could find show that occurred at a white-only institution.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Yes.
Yeah, my question is related to the 230 deaths that happened at the House of Reformation. Are those 230 deaths limited to just those that have been identified at the gravesite, or are there other deaths that exist outside of that context that may have happened when the house was transferred to the Department of Juvenile Services or to the state?
That's an excellent question, and so I'm going to split it a little bit. When it comes to the time frame, the 230 number pertains to the founding date, 1873. 1973 to then 1939, which is 2 years after the 2 years after the state transfer of the House Reformation. So that's the time frame. There could have been more deaths at the successor institutions of the House Reformation, such as the Cheltenham School for Boys, etc. But as far as the date for those 230 number, it's 1873 to 1939. And as far as whether or not those 230 boys were buried there, that's an important question. The thing that I can say is that there are boys who died at the facility or died as a result of the facility who are not then buried on the plots. And you can see that in some of the newspaper articles that covered killings at the facility. If they say went to a hospital off ground and then died there, then that might be an instance where their family could have then gotten their remains. But as far as the 230 number, if that fully encompasses just those who were buried, I'm actually not quite sure.
Okay, let's thank Crystal for her outstanding presentation, thorough research and reporting. And now we'll hear from Commissioner Hammond. Commissioner Hammond, thank you.
Good afternoon, Commission and Advisory Board members, Attorney General Brown, and staff members of the Commission of the Attorney General's Office, which we need to give a big shout out. You all have done a tremendous job with putting all this together, and we so appreciate all the time and effort that you put into this. I feel very welcome to be a part of this group. You always are there if I have any questions, concerns. I just find you to be a top-notch group to work with, and I'm very grateful for that. One correction, I do not have a PhD, so I'll take it, but I don't have it, so.
Commissioner Hammond, that was just a natural response from the brilliance of your presentation 2 weeks ago when we were on that Zoom.
Thank you. So, as stated earlier, my name is Phyllis Hammond, and I have been appointed to serve on the Commission of the House of Reformation for colored children representing a family member who was incarcerated and died at the House of Reformation. I want to first of all start off by acknowledging some folks that are here today. My husband, Michael Butts, and my son, Irvin Black Jr. I just want to thank you all for your unconditional support. It means so much to me. I also have other family and friends, and there are other family members that are on our committee that are here. They couldn't be here in person, but they are here on virtual joining us today. So I want to also thank them for their support. So as we are moving forth, I want you to know, first of all, that I take this role on this commission very seriously. And I will do my best not only for the children, but for the families as well. Through the work of the Forgotten Children Initiative at Georgetown University Center for Youth Justice, I learned that my uncle, Amos Hammond, was admitted into the House of Reformation for colored children in 1916, and at the approximate age of 13 years old for being what they call incorrigible, whatever that really means. I also learned that in 1920, he was placed by the institution as a servant in the household of a white farmer in Carroll County. And this is a little funny. Not funny, it's almost disturbing because my family lived in Carroll County. So I'm wondering exactly where did he work in Carroll County? How close was he to his family? And they not even know of his existence and where he was. So when I found out all this information, it's just very profoundly, it's just so much profound information that you gather that how this facility was operating and not only this facility, but others. So he worked as a servant in this white farmer's residence. He was then returned to the House of Reformation in April of 1921 and died at the facility 2 months later at the age of 18. It is my understanding he was buried at the wooded grounds in the institution that they used as a burial site. He was among more than approximately 300 or more young black boys who died at the hands of this state-operated facility that appeared to have suspicious and illegal circumstances that occurred for many years without any thorough investigations, accountability, or legal provisions implemented to protect them from harm and danger that they endured until their questionable deaths. Unfortunately, these type of practices in juvenile institutions and other correctional programs are still taking place today. So as we address the injustice done to my uncle Amos and all the other voiceless young boys, we also need assurance that the laws and provisions will be in place so that there will be accountability by these state-operated facilities. My oldest son, Jason Butler, who is not here today, was also a victim of abuse at Noyce, Waxters, Fairbridge, and Hickey juvenile institutions. The damages he endured as a youth has been everlasting, negative impacts throughout his life. As a mother, I live with this guilt every day because I entrusted the state with my beloved son. No child or parent should have to deal with this type of relentless, ongoing trauma. Maryland and America has got to do better. As this commission moves forward to disclose, rectify, and bring some form of dignity to these boys who died at the House of Reformation and are currently incarcerated at the Cheltenham Youth Detention Center. It is necessary, and when I was writing this, I didn't know our Attorney General was going to address it, but there has been some concerns about the families pertaining to the potential of the conflict of interest. So I'm not going to elaborate on that, and I want to thank you for taking the time to clarify the role of your office and the state of Maryland. So thank you so much. But as we move forward, it is very important for this board to be focused and really listening to the needs of the families. This is why it is very important for the state of Maryland to build the trust and to make sure our voices are heard and that we have say on how this process moves forward. There are quite a few families that have requested having the bodies and the 2 burial sites exhumed for forensic investigation in order to, first and foremost, disclose the true causes of the premature deaths, and to also possibly impact on the DNA findings to help reunite more family members to their loved ones. And we even have some of the family members that have stated that they would really love to have if possible, to find the remains, to have them relocated to their family's burial lots where they feel their loved ones belong. Some of these requests may not lead to answers or results that we would hope for, but we will never know unless the state puts forth the time, effort, and funding to follow through on what we, the families, deem is necessary. I would like to take this time to recognize and thank Mark Schindler, Melissa Ruffner, and Georgetown University's commitment to the Forgotten Children Initiative. Without their intense research, time, and effort, these young boys would still be unrecognized, and families would not have been connected to their ancestors and joined together in full force to do the right thing in representing them. We are grateful for their guidance, support, and their understanding of our emotional grief as we navigate strategies moving forward. We are determined to be the voice and to take the role in major decision makings throughout this entire process. We are firm and committed in our belief that no decision should be made about our children without full engagement and participation with the families of the children. We are very hopeful in partnering with the Commission and having our presence in this process, and that this will bring some relief and closures to the grieving families, and bring dignity to the burial site, and serve as a memorial so that our family members will no longer be forgotten, and to help bring awareness to the violence, corruptions, and senseless murders that occur, all with the goal that this madness stops. In conclusion, I would like to take this opportunity to share a poem that I wrote on the day after I visited the burial site with Mark Schindler in April of 2026. The name of the poem, which is dedicated to the memory of my uncle and all the other children buried at the House of Reformation burial site. And I call it, If These Woods Could Talk. If these woods could talk, I'd wonder what they'd say. If these woods could talk, would they share stories of long ago about the unspoken deaths of over 230 or more Black boys living in the hostile conditions at the House of Reformation and Instruction Reform School in Prince George's County? If these woods could talk, would they talk about the screaming, crying, and fear that came from across that road at the facility from these boys that no one would listen to or help because they didn't care? If these woods could talk, would they share the gruesome details of how these innocent boys between the ages of 10 to 25 would be buried in these woods like they were mere wild animals, disposed of with no legal reasonings or legitimate causes? If these woods could talk, would they share how brutal and cruel they were treated by these corrupt authoritarians day in and day out without any justices in place to protect them from harm? If these woods could talk, do you think they could share each of these young boys' tragic lives and deaths while entrusted in the hands of the juvenile system? If these woods could talk, could they share the pain and the scars that they endured across their fragile bodies? If these woods could talk, would they share how these boys worked long, hard manual labor without proper food or shelter, regardless of whether their health could withstand the demands? If these woods could talk, would they share the anguish, the grief, and the fear their families lived day in and day out, not knowing where their children went or what happened to them? If these woods could talk, would they share the horrifying stories and the smirky comments and jokes from the predators that imposed death on these vulnerable individuals while digging holes and dumping their bodies, like disposing of useless trash? And instead of using plots to identify them, they'd use rows of cinder blocks. If these woods could talk, I wonder if these woods would have raised their voices loud and clear against the lawlessness of what they seen, heard, and became a part of. Criminal injustice. If these woods could talk, I wonder if they're still sharing horror stories about children of color nationwide being wrongfully detained and mistreated in reform schools as they were years ago. If only these woods could talk, maybe many lives could have been saved. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. Next, I'm going to ask Sophie Sike to take the commission to explain the Family Advisory Committee protocols, and then see if we'll make a motion to see if we can approve them at this meeting.
So I shared the protocols via email. You all should have received a copy. I will walk you through the highlights. The AG has created a Family Advisory Committee. It stands as a standing advisory body to the commission throughout its entire tenure. It is open to any family member with direct connection to the House of Reformation. Meetings will be held on a regular basis at a cadence that is set jointly between the advisory committee and staff. Committee members will have a direct point of contact on the commission through staff for questions and concerns in between meetings. And commission staff will provide regular updates on advance notice of commission meetings and agendas, progress on site investigation and genealogical research, summaries of commission discussions and decisions relevant to families' interests. And we will also give an opportunity to review materials before finalization or public release. Staff will document and convey family recommendations to commissioners in writing and at commission meetings with outcomes tracked and reported back to the families. And families may also submit recommendations directly to the commission staff at any time outside of scheduled meetings.
Are there any questions or discussion on the protocols?
I'm just wondering if Ms. Hammond or Dr. Gorham or Ms. Gibbons, if they have any questions or if they're okay. I'm most interested in their perspective on the committee protocols.
Do you need us to repeat the question really quick?
The other question, because we are involved with other family members, and we do respect, of course, privacy, but we will have to share to some degree, conversations that we have on this board, so I don't think it's gonna have a big impact, but, you know, and I think it's clear that we do have to, admit to the fact that we will be definitely sharing what we are doing on this committee and even the subcommittees. There will have to be some sharing. So is that going to be conflict, do you see?
You know, there is an Open Meetings Act that we follow. There's also the Public Information Act. Both of those statutes, which the OAG is sort of the custodian of those, are premised on sunshine in government, open government. So the presumption is that you can share information on the commission. There may be times when the commission goes into a closed session for a discussion around a particular matter. If we do, it'll have to comply with the open meetings law. So you'll know, we'll all know when that is and what information is sensitive, particularly at a given time before it might be disclosed, or we'll identify if there's information that under the Public Information Act cannot be disclosed. I can't say right now whether that is going to be a lot of information that you wouldn't be able to disclose or a little, but understand going forward that the presumption is sunshine, open, transparency, accountability, because I think that's the way that we'll work best.
document?
I wanted to confirm that the families had a role in creating this framework.
No, the families did not have a role. This is the framework that we proposed. However, if there are any edits or suggestions, we are happy to take them on. Yes, Commissioner Blakely.
Thank you. I didn't see how this element was incorporated, so I'd like to put it on the table. And I'm speaking in light of the recent work of the Commission for the Ethical Treatment of Human Remains of the American Anthropological Association that has made recommendations on how human remains are to be treated by archaeologists here, and since we went around the world, it has implications for archaeologists around the world. But I'm also going to say it's consistent with the Native American Graves Protection and Repatriation Act that applies to specifically Native Americans, Hawaiians, and Alaskans. What is consistent is that descendants have the sole right to determine the disposition of their ancestral remains. Subject, I'm sure, to the conditions of law, but I would say all other things being equal, it's the descendants, it's not multiple stakeholders, and the Commission's report, which I would be very happy to share, Attorney General, prioritizes lineal descendants, those who know their specific relationship, familial relationship to the individuals whose remains are concerned first, and then without them, descendant community, which is a community of people who are possibly related and who care about those remains. There are a number of places where that definition has been developed. It began with the African Burial Ground in New York. And then there are other communities of care that would come third that are more broadly defined. So it's important, in fact, at one point, we argue that the term coming from, I think it was either the Japanese or Australians, that the term, consultation not be used, because very often they have heard from anthropologists, archaeologists, that they are to consult when it means everything but the idea that they are to determine what should be their ancestral, the treatment of their ancestral. I hope some language providing those powers, those rights to descendants would be incorporated in the document that we're discussing.
Are there any other questions or feedback?
I have a question about how the advisory members, how will we be used in the process of contributing to our specific committees? In other words, what role will we be expected to play?
Advisory members will participate fully. The only difference is they will not be able to vote on any commission matters. But they are welcome to join the subcommittees, to lend their expertise, to provide feedback on RFPs, on decisions, on documents. It's just when it comes to voting, that would just be limited to the commission members.
Well, how will the documents or whatever the agenda is be made available?
It will be shared similar to the first meeting, so staff will email documents. We're also creating a shared folder where we will upload documents for review and grant access.
question, Dr. Blake, is there anything in we're not gonna force a vote today, I mean, we're not.
Oh.
Is there anything as we go back and look at this, is there anything that you saw in the protocols and framework, like, for example, is consultation in here?
I don't remember.
Okay, but I understand definitely the point you're making, so we'll go through that, and keep in mind that, and consultation, that's a good point that you made, because that is process, and process is important in determining good outcome. So we don't want bad process, and we don't want these protocols to set up a bad process. So we'll go through looking for things like consultation, and I certainly ask everyone to take a look at them with another eye towards the protocols, respond back to staff on suggestions, inputs, whatever, and then we'll recirculate this and then take it up at the appropriate time whenever we next meet. Thank you.
It's a very good thing.
Yes.
So we have a question here.
Not a question, just a statement. It was brought up to me that some of the family members are elderly and we're familiar with the calendar system, but everybody's not familiar with the calendar. So I understand some people get emails, but some information was just being sent to the calendar. So just be a little bit more vigilant that certain things that's common to us, some people are elders as family members, so just be a little bit more vigilant to make sure that they are aware of the documents and how things are being shared. Because you can say a shared folder, but if somebody isn't privy to Google and Google Drives and different documents that's common to us, they can get a little lost in the process.
We're gonna be on top of it.
Our next agenda item will be a budget update from Commissioner Tiana Davis.
Good afternoon, everyone. Again, my name is Tiana.
Yeah.
Again, my name is Tiana Davis, and I'm the Director of the Office of Equity and Inclusion at the Department of Juvenile Services. And it is a true honor to be with you all today to launch this really important mission. It's been my great honor as well to have spearheaded this work on behalf of the Department of Juvenile Services over the last 2 years. So it especially warms my heart to see all of your faces here today and bringing all of your expertise, experience, your backgrounds, your commitment and deep passion for this work to this table, because I think it's going to take all of us and some more to get this done in the way that I know that we are all committed to getting it done. Quickly, just wanted to provide a budget update. The Commission's work is very generously resourced thanks to the foresight of the Legislative Black Caucus and bringing forth the legislation that establishes this Commission and the strong support of Governor Westmore. The financial backing that is available to this Commission reflects a genuine commitment from the state to bring sunlight to this history, as the Attorney General mentioned, to restore dignity to the young people, families, and Black communities that have been most deeply harmed by this history, and that still bear the brunt of that harm as it relates to our present-day youth justice system. We have available to us the Commission has available access to about $1.25 million right now to support the Commission's work over the next year and a little bit beyond. About $1 million, just a little over $1 million in general state budget allocations, some operating funds, as well as a $200,000 capital grant from the African American Heritage Preservation Program. So just a few important considerations. So with the general operating budget allocation, the $1 million, It has a strict use it or lose it timeline associated with it. And that means that every dollar has to be fully spent or encumbered through a signed contract by June 30th, 2027. The $200,000 grant, there's a little more flexibility, as I understand, with the timelines, but greater restrictions on what we can use those funds for. There's limitation on that is limited to capital improvements and sort of physical site work, not the historical research and the genealogy and other things that you're going to hear about shortly. So we have some resources, and just to kind of share how this will work moving forward. Hopefully, this is agreeable, that the commission is agreeable to this plan that we have. Because the budget allocation has come to DJS, and that decision was made, I think, in advance of this commission being established, which is why it's with DJS right now. We're gonna be using our existing infrastructure and our procurement team, which will be critical in sort of making sure that the commission is able to do the things that the commission opts to do. Our partnership, the model for our partnership is straightforward. The commission, the Office of the Attorney General, will drive the strategic vision, the community engagement, and the research priorities around this important work. And DJS will serve as the operational arm for the fiscal matters related to the work. So we have a pretty good fiscal outlook, at least for the year coming, and the commitment in place to advance the work. Again, I'm very grateful to be partnering with each of you to turn this historic initiative into a true model of restorative justice for Maryland. The work of my office at DJS, the Office of Equity and Inclusion, our goal is to work toward a system where a young person's race no longer predicts their outcomes. And I think that having the foundation of this work to build from will be critical in advancing that vision. So thank you, and we'll open it up to any questions if there are any.
Yes.
What's your question down here?
Yes. Commissioner Hammond?
You can hear me okay?
Yes.
I have a pretty loud voice though. I don't know how cut and dry this is right now, but I'm thinking that there has to be room for flexibility. We have talked with the family members in our previous meetings, and as I mentioned in my testimony, I feel like a lot of us are feeling like we want the grounds exhumed. So, if that 1.2 million, and especially the 1 million that we have to use before the end of 2027, how will that be able to get us moving if this commission, the families, and the subcommittees, boards, whatever, see fit that we do move forth with exhuming the grounds?
So I'll take that question. So this is a multi-year effort. The commission itself is established for, correct me, 2 or 3 years? How many years? When
29.
So the commission itself is a 2.5 year, has a 2.5 year life. And I envision that much of the recommendations that come out of this commission will actually be executed even after the commission no longer exists, or we may go back to the General Assembly and say we need to extend the life of the commission. There's a lot of work to be done, and many of you know this more than I do. This is, and we walk the burial ground. I mean, they're just the physical elements of what needs to be done to identify the scope of the grounds, to then further identify locations. The discussions are going to be had about what then to do whether it's exhumation or the remains, just generally to what to do with the site itself, how to commemorate it, how to preserve it, and things like that. That's going to take a lot of time, and although I'm not even close to a subject matter expert or that knowledgeable, it's going to be a lot more than $1.2 million. So the way I'm viewing this is sort of like a design build approach. And what do I mean by that? This 1.2 is really going to fund the kind of the groundwork we need to do to understand those things, right? The genealogy work, and then maybe the surveying work. I don't even know if it'll cover all the surveying work, but a lot of the design stuff, the heavy lifting, the things that are going to come after. I'm almost certain we're going to have to go back to General Assembly and ask for more money. So, and as was outlined, that $1 million, we have to responsibly spend that by June 30th of next year. And a lot of the things that we understand need to be done will not happen before June 30th. But we're going to move expeditiously, we're going to spend the money responsibly, we're going to do all the design, the scoping, laying out what needs to be done, and setting a foundation for what ultimately is going to be done, which invariably is going to cost a lot more than 1.2 million. Did I get that right? Okay.
Yeah, just a question about what's the priority. You mentioned a lot of things. What's the priority for the spending? What do you think is going to, at least the top 3 priorities?
You want to take that? Yeah.
So the very first request for proposal that we hope to get out is the genealogical services RFP. So that is the top priority. I'm going to share a list of potential contracts and RFPs. That list is tentative, but that is, the genealogy is the first on the list, and that is the only one that is not tentative. We think that that is a priority. But everything else on the list is open to feedback. The list, so it is the potential contracts and request for proposal list that was shared. It is tentative. All RFPs and contractual hires will remain subject to the commission approval before moving forward. All procurements and scope of works and proposed vendors will be brought before the commission before moving forward for approval. Any recruitment for contractual staff will be circulated to the commission to share with your networks. And we are still in the process of investigating whether particular roles are best served contracting with an organization, or whether we should hire an individual as a contractual employee. This list doesn't represent a commitment to a proposed order or any decisions regarding consolidation of work. It is just the list that a small group of commissioners have come up with to advance the work of the commission. We do request that as commissioners identify needs to advance the work of the commission, that they elevate it. The commissioners suggest RFPs, commissioners suggest contractual hires, and everything will be brought before the commission because ultimately it is the commission's decision.
And I think that's exactly the kind of thing that goes to the family first. Like what, I mean, understanding when the family committee meets, what are the priorities for what would they like to see happen first? And if there's justification for, when you said we decided that we was a subgroup of the commission, is that the understanding when you said we decided what the potential contracts are? I mean, this is.
Oh, we didn't decide, we just came up with a list of potential. It was a few representatives from the commission that represent the agencies that have the subject matter expert to do genealogical services, to do site investigations, to do archaeology, to do records, looking up records. We invited a few of the agency commissioners to just help us come up with a list to present to the commissioners, knowing that we would have to identify potential additional contracts, additional requests for proposals, and just help us organize the list. So if there's anything on there that a commissioner or an advisory member has an objection to, we do welcome that feedback. We just wanted to present a list because we know we have to hit the ground running. We have a year to encumber and get some of these RFPs. We also know with site investigations, it depends on the time of year when they can go out there. So there's just a lot of sequencing and considerations that have to go into the order of issuing the RFPs.
I think I understand the big picture, but again, I do think, in terms of setting priorities, again, to the family, to talk to the committees, you would get feedback. Not just feedback on what has been decided, but in terms of how the family views this entire process, and in terms of what's prioritized and what families want to prioritize. I just the voices, the understandings, perspectives, and I understand the hitting the ground running and the need to have some place to start, especially the bigger pieces, genealogy and surveying, are big pieces. But I do believe again that this starting ground to hear what families are saying, and I'm sure you will respond to.
And that is one of the reasons why we have genealogy as the first, because we have to identify family members. We do have the 3 family members who are on the commission. However, we need to identify more families.
I think the total number of families that have been identified is beyond 3.
We don't have that information.
Right, let me say that I think in the universe of knowledge, I think there are many families that have been identified. We are now a new entity. We are a commission that it will be staff driven in terms of the technical stuff and the logistics and the admin, but the thought and the thinking and the substance of the work is this commission, and this is a new commission. So one of the things that we need to do is the families that maybe you know of, and the families that nobody knows of, we've got to do our level best. And that's why it's first out of the gate, identify as many families as possible and try to connect them, if that's their will, if that's their interest, to the work of the commission.
Yeah, I think we read the list at our family gathering. We read the list of the 200 boys and the names. But, and at the upcoming Janet Reno conference in September, there are going to be maybe about 20 families gathering. This is not, I mean, the number's growing like that. So the voices, as we come together to have this input, I mean, I think it's going to make a difference into the citizenship. But yes, families are being identified pretty quickly. And at least the core group that we have now is beyond 20, I'd say, or 30 families.
And also, when we do have questions and concerns or things that we would like to share as just participating members with no voting power, I understand that. Is that something that we should do through our commissioner? Or what do we do if we have questions or concerns, ideas? How do the acting members make those concerns or issues known to the commission?
Yes.
Sometimes labels get in the way. Just for a minute now, you can erase advisory. You can erase commissioner. I mean, advisory members are, with an asterisk, no voting, full members of the commission. So if you have, if any member, any advisory member has a question, concern, whatever, whoever doesn't have Sophie's information ought to have Sophie's information. Your direct line to Sophie. She is here with Tiffany and Tanita, and we got a whole bunch of other folks who are helping them. We are at your disposal. So you don't have to go through anybody. If you're on advisory committee, you're direct. The only thing that differentiates advisory from commission is voting. Because as we looked at all the interest in the commission, it's like, oh my goodness, it's more than the 20 slots we got by statute. So how do we do it? We say, oh, we'll do it.
I think what we're just trying to figure out is what is the proper protocol?
Are you communicating? Yeah, are you receiving the emails and stuff like that from Sophie?
Yes.
Okay, that is the main way that we communicate, is through email. So if you have any issues, questions, also, and I think, at some point we're gonna get to it in this meeting, there's gonna be committee structures.
Okay.
And a lot of work is gonna be done at the committees. In fact, the committees are gonna meet more often than the commission will.
And I guess that's what I'm going through in my mind as we get started in our respective responsibilities. What is the proper protocol? I want to do something or that's,
So maybe we can have
A visual, and I know we have these documents, but we need something that will help us to see, visually the connections between the committee and the commission, the advisory, and how, even in this protocol, structure. And I know it's developing, but this clearly is not working completely in terms of communicating what is happening and how it's happening. So it's nice to have documents, but we need something more. And I'm just suggesting some kind of graphic and that we can see exactly the flow, what happens, how, and we're moving really rapidly. I'm trying to understand even this year that this limited time is such a big project and so many boys that we can try to make this happen by a certain time. I think that already we're in, rocking out this trying to do that.
All right, we have another question. Okay.
My name is Deirdre Gibbons, and I am descendant of Mr. Ames as well. And this is my mother on the advisory board. So I've had a general question because it's my understanding that the only other state where a project of this type has taken place was in Florida. And because this is a new commission and a new process for the state, are you benchmarking or using that process that they went through to kind of give you guidance or a guideline as to how to meet out this process?
Yes, so Dr. Erin Kimberly, who ran that project, is actually an advisory member. She is signed on virtually, and we hope to tap into her expertise and guidance as we embark on this work.
Say one thing about, thank you, this kind of organization. And I've worked with many descendant communities, often in Virginia, but really in different parts of the U.S. What your committee constitutes, it appears to me, is a descendant community, partly because you don't know your specific relationship to specific burials. But as a community of descendants, you know your relationships to the burials as a whole. And the National Trust for Historic Preservation has, in 2018, created a rubric for working with descendant communities beyond memorialization and cemeteries, but to include control of plantation sites to tell their own story. And so I'll just use some of that to say that what they are recommending is a committee, and you have already have a committee. And that it's important that the committee be inclusive of all possible descendants, and that it is self-identified, so that your leadership is your leadership, not identified by someone else, and that the committee is democratic in its decision making. When it forms, it then it becomes informed, and so it's important for, and much of this is already going on, but that communicating with the rest of the commission and the kinds of things that we heard today, so that when the committee determines what it wants done relative to the ancestral remains in this case, that will be an informed decision. Forming as a committee, though, will allow you to talk among yourselves, to make your own decisions with, and will have therefore integrity of voice as descendants. Because what has been seen from time to time are sometimes attempts to, I'll take James Madison's Montpelier was a classic case, where the old white board accepted these national trust conditions, but then started to attempt to tokenize the representation of the descendant community by deciding that they will choose the black people to represent the descendants of the enslaved. Or you have multiple stakeholder models. I've seen this in Maryland in certain places, where the voice of that descendant committee group, or descendant community group, are being weighed against agencies and others that ultimately bring things to override what it is the descendants themselves want. And so at least you can make it clear about what it is that you want with the integrity of voice that comes with decisions that take place within your committee. So the committee would be in a position then to report to the rest of the commission along the way. If I look back to New York as well, individuals, where there are public meetings as well, individuals as today on the commission and beyond the commission can speak up and say what they think is important relative to the disposition of the remains. But final decisions are best made formally by the committee as a kind of polity. This often, and of course it's important that the commission is doing what its priorities seem sound to me, because you want to increase, you want that to be an inclusive committee. So reaching out to find as many descendants as possible is important. This will probably take quite a bit of time. In the meanwhile, the committee is congealing. I think that was the one.
Yeah, thank you for framing that out, yeah.
Yeah.
Excuse me, may I ask a question?
Where are we? Oh, yes.
Hi.
I was like, God.
Hi, I'm Erin Kimberly. I'm sorry that I couldn't be there with you today. Thank you so much for including me, and I'm very honored and happy to be part of this historic project. I oversaw the investigation in Florida that was mentioned, the Arthur G. Dozier School for Boys, and in that situation, it was very similar in a lot of ways. The reform school, over 100 boys were killed, and we were able to find, excavate, and identify over 50 burials. These were all unmarked burials in the woods, and so there's a lot of similarities. And so the one thing I just wanted to suggest with regard to the RFP and some of the things on the agenda today, and kind of reiterate what Ms. Hammond and some of the other family members said, is just that for them, the past is the present. And even though this is a historic justice type of project, it gets so complicated because historic justice and modern justice, they're interwoven and they overlap. And what we found really helpful was to approach the whole project very much as a death investigation, where everything is done in that sort of forensic model, even though it's not going to go to a criminal court. That's not the point, but it just allows those pathways so that down the road, I mentioned if they do want excavation, if they do want identification, it's just about setting up that process now so that it leads, to that path if that's where it goes. So when you are looking for a genealogist, for example, you have to maybe consider, do you really want that person to contact families? And maybe you do or maybe you don't, but there may be certain protocols, right? The approach. I found that in reaching out to families, it can be very distressing. It can be very challenging. We had a lot of siblings who, for 50, 60, 70 years were denied information from the state, never told what happened to their brothers, and now, it's like the grieving process doesn't even begin. And so I'm just mentioning it because you may want to have a certain protocol for the genealogist, for example, or you may want that family information given back to a committee who then reaches out. There's just different ways to handle it, but it's something that I think is worth a good discussion. Likewise, if you ultimately get to that point where you do want to be able to do identifications, well, then we have to have, or we would want to have maternal relatives, because usually it's what's called mitochondrial DNA. It's a certain type of DNA, and so we have to be sure to have maternal relatives. So there's just lots of sort of things to consider in terms of the process and the procedures. The last thing I'll just mention, usually whoever's going to do your field work, the GIS, GPR, confirming burials, looking for the locations, mapping them, is not going to be the genealogist. So I know you were mentioning maybe hiring an organization or multiple individuals. It might be something you want to either separate or make clear that it's more of a lead researcher that you're hiring who will then subcontract out those different services. So that's just a couple of things that caught my eye and I wanted to mention.
Thank you.
Thank you. So before we turn it over to the subcommittees, I just do want to flag that we put an initial draft for the genealogical RFP. We understand this draft needs a lot of work. So we are requesting commissioners, advisory members to please get in contact with Tiffany Diamo and myself so we can convene a work group and we can finalize this RFP and hopefully post it. So please just email us after this meeting and we can schedule a work group to finalize this scope of work. And we are running short on time, so I think we will turn it over to Tiffany to go through the subcommittees, and then after that, we'll turn it over to Commissioner Bachman to give a records update, and then we can turn it over to Professor Bernard to close this out. So, Tiffany.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. I just want to take the next few minutes to walk everyone through how the commission subcommittees are organized, who's been assigned to which subcommittee, where we still need co-chairs, and how members of the public can get involved. You have a sheet in your meeting packet with a full list of subcommittee assignments, so if you want to take a look as we walk through it, that would be advisable, but not mandatory. So the commission has organized its work into 5 subcommittees, each tied to a core piece of our mandate under SB 776. They are investigation and forensic science, oversight of contrasted forensic anthropology, archaeology, ground penetrating radar survey work, historical records research, and if authorized DNA analysis, descendant and community engagement, which is on the first page, which includes descendant notification, public testimony and healing events, stipend and travel reimbursement administration, documentation of descendant preferences on excavation reburial, cemetery, memorial, and site preservation, which includes cemetery restoration and preservation, integration with the Department of Juvenile Services HPP grant work already underway, permanent memorial design, and long-term maintenance planning, historical research and accountability, which is institutional history, reconstruction, records, access from state archives, DJS, and other agencies, and findings on state accountability for our reports. And then education, policy, reform, and reconciliation, which includes curriculum recommendations, systemic reform, and reparative measures, and documentations of lessons learned. So here's how it'll work. Subcommittees will do the deep sustained work in their lane and then bring these recommendations back to the full commission for a vote. Subcommittees don't have independent decision-making authority. They just build the record and develop the options, and then the commission acts on them. So for frequency, we're aiming for each subcommittee to meet monthly, virtually, preferably. OAG staff will be reaching out in the coming weeks to get those meetings on the calendar. So take a look at the sheet. For those of you who completed a subcommittee interest form, we did our best to prioritize your preferences and honor them. For members who hadn't yet complete that form, we made an initial assignment based on your background and expertise. That's where we are now. This form is tentative. So if your assignment doesn't feel like the right fit, that's completely fine. This is not locked in. Please reach out to me or AAG Asike, and we will look at your preferred assignment closely. So going into co-chairs, for 2 of our 5 subcommittees, we already have both co-chairs identified. For education, policy, reform, and reconciliation, we have Commissioner Justin Hansford and advisory member James Dold. For investigations and forensic science, we have Commissioner Siobhan Summers and Dr. Catherine Alrix. And then for the remaining 3, we're still building out our co-chair leadership. Right now, we have cemetery memorial site preservation. As advisory member, Colleen Flowers has agreed to serve as co-chair, and we're also looking for a second co-chair for that commission. 2 subcommittees do not have either co-chair identified. They are descendant and community engagement and historical research and accountability. So I want to put this in the room directly to all of you. If you are interested in co-chairing any of these 3 subcommittees, please find me or Sophia Asike after the meeting or send us an email. We'd love to have you join us and organize how these subcommittees will work before their first meetings. And again, last point, this work is bigger than the people in the room, and we want it to be. So members of the public who are interested in assisting us can join these subcommittee meetings based on their areas of expertise and interest. The simplest way to do that is to email the commission at horcommission@oag.maryland.gov. Again, that's horcommission@oag.maryland.gov. And let us know which subcommittee interests you and why. And that's the overview, so I'll pause here if anyone has questions.
Any questions? Yes.
Thanks. And I just want to start by thanking you all for the tremendous amount of work that has brought us to this point. I have kind of a clarifying question about how these subcommittees work together and share information. Obviously, there's so much interrelated content and work across this ecosystem, and we need, for the purposes of forward motion, to have the work divided and leadership to take place on a faster cadence than the full commission can meet. So all of that I understand well. But it's more like, I will say that when I was filling out my form, I really struggled with where to put my first choice across the policy committee that I'm now on and historical research and accountability, because these tasks are so inextricably linked. So for example, under the accountability, which is a word that threads through the entirety of this commission's work, analysis of systemic failures, findings on state accountability. Yet with the policy committee, we're focused on recommending systemic reforms, reparative measures. Those are dependent upon kind of how we understand and document and agree upon what the accountability is to respond to that. And I've been, throughout this profound meeting and conversation, just this theme of the past is present, how that's continued to come up. So I wanted to pose those questions as we think about where our best fit is and how we communicate with each other.
Yeah, and you may recall, Heather, from the Equitable Justice Collaborative, so our goal here was to make sure that, everyone's on a committee, right? Which doesn't mean that you're not welcome to participate in any other committee. That's one way we can cross-pollinate. The other way we can do it is we're gonna do it through our staff. Because our staff is gonna staff every committee, and our staff is going to be looking out for those intersecting issues and making sure that the communications are working between the two committees. So those are two ways that we're gonna address it, and as you know from experience, that's always just such a huge challenge to get that right. But those are some of the things that we're gonna do, and any other thoughts and ideas on how to ensure, kind of continuity and overlap are welcome.
Okay, right over here.
Is there a job description for the co-chairs? Do you have some?
We don't have a job description for co-chairs, so co-chairs will be doing additional work. They will work with staff to identify agenda items. They will be the ones, we're hoping all the co-chairs will periodically meet to share information or share plans. But a lot of the work is going to be done at the subcommittee level, and we are going to encourage all members of the subcommittee to participate, but often the delegation and some of the decision-making will fall towards the co-chairs with staff supporting.
Thank you, Sophie. AG question?
So you mentioned that there's going to be a shared drive. So I think one of the ways that we can share that information then is just to make sure that there's a requirement that whenever our committees are meeting, that those are putting our minutes up there so we can rifle through the folders of the other subcommittees if we want to see what's going on there. And are the co-chairs going to be responsible for scheduling the meetings?
No, so staff will handle the technical aspects such as scheduling, getting the agendas. There also is a House of Reformation webpage that falls under our OAG webpage, and we will have links to the subcommittees where we will post agendas and dates for meetings. So anyone in the public will be able to see when the subcommittees are meeting. The subcommittees will meet virtually. So the members of the public are also encouraged to attend if they have an area of expertise that they would like to provide their expertise or feedback.
Any questions?
Okay, so now I will turn it over to Commissioner Bachman. Thank you.
Hold on, Commissioner, hold on, I'm coming. I'm getting a workout, I think I got 10,000 steps.
Thank you, General Brown and fellow commissioners. My name is Elaine Rice Bachman. I'm the Maryland State Archivist. It is my privilege to serve on this commission ex officio, and the agency that I represent ex officio is the Maryland State Archives. And I want to make a verbal commitment to all of you here today that I will, to the full extent, apply the resources of the agency of which I am the head toward the work of this commission. And a great deal of that resource is human resource, our staff who have years and years of expertise in the records that we have and in making the connections across the other records that exist outside of government records. And in a show of that support is that I'm supported today by some of the key staff who are going to be doing this work. And if I could take the point of privilege to introduce them. Assistant State Archivist Emily Olin Squires is here. Assistant State Archivist Corey Lewis is attending virtually. Chris Haley, who is the Director of Research and the lead of the Legacy of Slavery in Maryland program, is here, as is Dr. William Kelly, who works with Chris in the Legacy of Slavery in Maryland program. The Maryland State Archives maintains multiple series of records and collections that will inform the work of this commission. I'm going to use some archival terms, but anybody here who would like this written out to have a summary, we brought copies today. If we don't have enough for everyone who might want to have them, with the permission of the commission, we will provide that via PDF to all the commissioners. So special collections are non-government records, and the special collections at the archives related to the House of Reformation include photographs, correspondence, and private papers. The Cheltenham School for Boys collection contains documents produced and compiled by 2 citizen organizations who lobbied for better representation on the institution's board of directors and state control of the House of Reformation. Other collections contain more photographs of the institution and its architecture. House of Reformation related government records are found most frequently at the folder level rather than an entire collection. For example, researchers will find 1874 legal documents related to the House of Reformation in the Scharf collection, or insurance reports on Cheltenham between 1920 and 1940 under the agency, the State Treasurer Records. Land, construction, and historic survey records offer invaluable information on the spatial history of Cheltenham. Other legal and legislative records of varying degrees of relation to Cheltenham include an Attorney General case file, grand jury reports, and governor's subject files over a series of years. A June 2026 meeting between the Maryland State Archives and the Department of Juvenile Services brought 5 units of material related to the House of Reformation to the archives for conservation and digitization. The materials include 3 ledgers, 1 index, and 1 collection of graphics, blueprints. Taken together, these sources provide insight into the House of Reformation's organizational structure, its system of punishment, and its daily operations from 1873 to 1937. Once the House of Reformation ledgers reached Maryland State Archives, our conservation department evaluated each volume's condition and designed a specialized treatment plan to prepare the records for imaging. Book bindings were stabilized, dirt was cleaned from pages, impacted volumes underwent mold remediation, and loose pages were recorrelated according to their original order. Storage solutions were devised for volumes affected by red rot, the deterioration of the ledger's leather covers into a red powder, to ensure the physical longevity of each record. Once properly conserved, the ledgers were transported to our imaging department, where each record was scanned into unit-level PDFs. Currently, one of our conservationists continues to work through treating and mending a set of blueprints related to the House of Reformation to prepare them for handling and imaging. As of August 4th, today, this phase of the conservation process is 60% complete. I want to commend the staff of the Department of Juvenile Services, specifically Tiana Davis and her team, a few of which we had the pleasure to meet and to learn from during our meeting in June. If not for their collective efforts to retrieve these records from sometimes very dilapidated and dangerous locations and preserve them, keeping them in their custody and providing safe housing, they very surely would have been lost. When the archive staff saw these and the information they contained, we were astonished at the possibilities these records present for identifying those who were in the custody of the state and making connections across nearly 2 centuries. And we may yet find more records like this in some of the properties. So on behalf of the archives and the people of Maryland for which we preserve and make accessible the public record, thank you, Tiana, and thank you to the Department of Juvenile Services. As I mentioned, we brought some printouts today. If anyone would like to have some of those, please see our team. And thank you for this opportunity.
Are there any questions on the records?
I have one. So, I walked the older facility, Boys Village, and I saw an administration building, I saw a medical building, and I saw a food service building. I saw a lot of the dormitories as well. But I'm thinking about those 3 in particular. Like, what is our sense of documents that may still be in those old dilapidated buildings? Has anybody walked like room to room, floor to floor, to inventory, not necessarily get preserved, but to understand what is the universe of documents that are still on the ground?
It's something we talked about collectively with Tiana. We have not physically done that ourselves. These are not even spaces that would be safe to do that in. So in talking about what might be some of the resources required, it might be, hazmat teams to go in and collect these. Because the sad truth is, if records weren't transferred to the archives in the past, they can't be preserved. And sometimes the only records they get saved are what somebody pulled out of there themselves over time, and then they come into government collections through a private collection. We would really like to facilitate that kind of exhaustive research through these buildings to see what can be found, but the fact of the matter is it would not be safe to just walk into them.
Right,
but I
so
think it's part of our process of discovery.
And I can add to that, and thank you very much for the acknowledgement. I cannot take credit, I was not the one who walked into those buildings. That happened many years ago, but I was able to and had the privilege to bring them their last leg to the state archives where they're rightful home, where they can be preserved and leveraged in this work that we're about to do and for posterity. I will say we do have, there are a couple of buildings that exist on our, the Cheltenham parcel of land that they are scheduled to be raised, I believe, in 2029. So definitely we want to get in there before that. And certainly our Secretary Tolentino is very open to working together in order to be able to do that safely. So, I think that's something that the commission will want to really contemplate over hopefully the next few meetings, because I think it's important every day that they're, wherever they might be, is a day that we risk losing some of the history. So I think that would be a great first agenda.
So I just was curious also if you've had any contact with former staff. I know I have been involved in the Crownsville Hospital project as well, and a lot of records were recovered because they were in engagement with former staff of the facility. So I don't know if that's happened for this facility or not.
Yes. So, yes. So we, there is one gentleman, I believe his name is Claude Waters, who had worked for the department for many, many years and has been named as sort of the keeper of the history. And so Crystal worked with him, and we will continue to work with him. And hopefully the commission will have an opportunity to work with him in order to bring any more of this, because he holds a lot of that history, and it would be wonderful to be able to document some of what he holds in his mind and his heart about the facility and the things that happen there.
Thank you. So my question is, have these records been digitized? If not, can we use some of the $1 million towards that?
In the records at the state archives are in the process of being digitized. You will not need to use any of your dollars toward it because our agency will be digitizing those for this commission.
And then as far as the records that have not been, that still are yet to be sort of gathered and collected, I mean, that's going to be part of what this commission through its committees are going to have to look at and recommend. Like, okay, we recommend that this be done, and to get a hazmat team to go in to work with DGS and archives and to budget for that work to be done. So that's going to be and this is all part of this design over the next year, designing all these things that need to be done.
I'm probably the only juvenile lifer on a commission. And so when you think about records before they raise the building, a common practice for children incarcerated is like we write on the walls. We write on the bunks, we write poems and songs, and we carve things in the floor. So just make sure that we don't get incarcerated to records being like papers and books, but capture that graffiti and that intellectual property, because when they put us in solitary confinement, they give us like pencils that's like the size of our pinky finger. So sometimes we like take sharp objects and just carve stuff in the floor. So just being vigilant that, you know, records is more than just papers and books, and to look at the things that they wrote on the walls and on the floors.
Yeah, before they.
The council project's doing a lot of collection of materials from the hospital too, so in a similar.
Anything more on records? Thanks for the presentation, thanks for the conversation.
And just a quick announcement for anyone who missed the site investigation, the site visit, we are identifying a September date. You will receive an email with 3 options, and we will just go with the majority vote. So now I will turn it over to Commissioner Michael Bernard to offer.
Before we do that, let me just do some housekeeping, because I'd like to end with the professor. So just a few things. One is, so this is our inaugural meeting, and through this conversation, already looking at ways that we're going to improve the way that we present, right? Like, we probably should have said, hey, this is the commission started with the organization, these are the committees, these are the roles and responsibilities, talk more about the workflow so everyone has an understanding, and then talk a little bit about the budget and things like that. We jump right into RFP and it's like, whoa, right? So, okay, so, and so we're gonna go back and we're gonna, you know, we're learning, because we're gonna get this right. So we're going to work with each of you to make sure that you're on the committee that you want to be on. We are going to, when I look at the committees, there are 2 of them where there's overlapping on this genealogy RFP. One is historical research, the other is the investigative. So as a minimum, we're going to engage all of the members on those 2 committees for this genealogy RFP, finalize it, bring it to the commission, get a thumbs up so we can get this thing going. It will be a collaborative process. We'll do it through these subcommittees that we set up. That's, you know, that's all I want to say administratively. Does anybody have anything before we turn it over to, yes?
Well, because we want to hear you, the people at home want to hear you too, so sorry about that. Thanks for your
I think this would be quick, I think. As a family member with Richard, I know the genealogy is really important, but I saw the trauma piece. Yes, as a psychologist, of course, I see that. But we've been meeting since February, the families have. We've been meeting since February. My family, once I told them, we collectively just mourned together. And we're still in mourning. And once we met all the other families, we're in mourning. I know we talk about remains and records, but just to know that we are, and I'm also a pastor as well, a psychologist. So to know that we have souls that need to be tended to, and we're sitting together, and I know this work has to be systematized, has to have a format, but I hope that we prioritize the families that are grieving, mourning, in shock. It doesn't matter that Richard, my cousin, died when he was 15 in 1935. I still feel it. So to make sure that we are prioritizing the families, every child is our child. So as we learned when we met, we may not find Richard, or we may not find her uncle Fred, but any child that is found through this process is our child. That's our relative. So there's a really deep thing that's happening here. Not just, of course with families, but if you're serving, I want you to feel it. That's all.
that was actually, I thought, a perfect ending.
Yeah, I know, me too, I just said.
So I certainly, there's nothing I could add to that, but just, I think being here today, and hearing such power, from Dr. Brown, from Commissioner Hammond, from Crystal, from everybody, I think it's clear to all of us that, the children who were confined at the House of Reformation were seen as disposable before they arrived there. They were seen as disposable while they were there. And for those who lost their lives there, they were seen as disposable after. And our job, our charge is to excavate history, examine the history, explain the history, and address the history. And we have this unique opportunity and this mandate to reach back to the times that we've read about, that we've learned about from all different sources, from family members to our studies, to the Eyes on the Prize, slavery, Reconstruction, Jim Crow, legally mandated segregation. And we have this obligation to get to the truth and to tell it clearly. And as well as the obligation to develop recommendations for systemic reform, that is to do something about the history. And Tiana Davis, I appreciate your vision of what the future should look like in that regard. And so, importantly, the work that we will undertake, or undertaking already, is in fidelity to the children who are confined to the House of Reformation, in fidelity to the families who are mourning or have yet to mourn, and is in fidelity to the communities that continue to be marginalized, excluded, and oppressed. And so we are honoring the lives and souls of those who paid the ultimate prices for being Black children. And so we must put a spotlight on their humanity. As Attorney General Brown stated in your opening remarks, we have to uplift their dignity, and perhaps most importantly, we have to love them. And we must do the same with their families, but we must do the same for their families. And I'm proud to be part of a commission where the families will be fully involved in the work. And Attorney General Brown, you alluded to this, you stated this at the beginning as well, that it's important of thinking about the moment that we're in nationally. This nation has been commemorating 250 years since the signing of the Declaration of Independence, signed in 1776. The House of Reformation opened almost 100 years after the signing, right? These young boys had nothing to do. They were not seen in this Declaration of Independence. We alluded to this, Attorney General Brown. We have federal administration at this time working hard, night and day, to erase history. To erase history from museums, and websites, and textbooks, from our schools. Specifically, though, they're focused on the history of racial violence, oppression, and exclusion. Also, we are still in a place as a country, Commissioner Hammond stated this so beautifully and painfully, that criminalizes Black children, that doesn't see Black children as children, and as far as Black children. So, the work that we are undertaking is first and foremost about the children who lived and died at this facility and their families, but it's also about Maryland and even about this country. So our job, as I see it, is to tell the history so clearly and so definitively that we ensure it's going to be passed down. And also that tomorrow will not be like yesterday or today. So this is a solemn duty that requires teamwork, learning from each other, hearing each other, valuing each other, and perhaps above all else, humility.
Thank you, Professor Bernard. And with that, I move to adjourn the meeting of the commission.
Not so shabby yourself.